The flashing blue lights erupted so suddenly in the rearview mirror that Marshal Darius Coleman S. Hart skipped a beat, literally a sharp, involuntary jolt that made him grip the steering wheel tighter. For one absurd second, he thought the cruiser was chasing someone else, anyone else, because surely this couldn't be happening again. He'd just crossed the bridge near Lake Bentonville, the humid Arkansas night pressing against the windows of his government-issued Tahoe. Marvin Gaye, as velvet voice crooning, "Ain't no mountain high enough," from the speakers. Darius had been humming along, picturing his little girl's gap-toothed grin when he walked through the door, his wife Tanya's tired but radiant smile after a week of him being gone. 7 straight days of federal task force grind, stakeouts, warrants, the kind of exhaustion that seeped into your bones. Tonight, all he wanted was silence, sleep, and the faint scent of Tanya's lavender lotion on the pillow beside him. But the siren didn't fade. It grew, wailing, insistent, a predator's howl slicing through the quiet. Darius swallowed a sigh that tasted like resignation and eased the Tahoe onto the gravel shoulder. No sudden moves, no frustration, just patience. The muscle memory of a black man in uniform who D learned long ago that survival sometimes meant swallowing pride whole. The rain had stopped an hour earlier, but the air still hung heavy with wet pavement and the metallic tang of storm. He reached for his wallet, set it deliberately on the dashboard like an offering, then placed both hands at 10 and 2, visible, calm, deliberate. Because he knew. God, he knew. 2 officers stepped out of the cruiser. The tall one, heavy-set, belt creaking under the strain, adjusted his stance like a man used to being obeyed. The younger one, lean and twitchy, swung his flashlight like a saber. Their silhouettes cut sharp against the strobing reds and blues, turning the wet road into a disco of dread. "Evening, sir," the older one drawled, palm resting casually but unmistakably near his holster. "Mind telling me why you're driving this late through Bentonville?" Darius kept his voice level, the same tone he used when calming a jittery witness. "Just heading home, officer." The younger cop, Cole Turner, his badge glinted, leaned in, flashlight beam slicing across Darius's face like a scalpel. "We got a call about a vehicle matching this description. Burglary near Rogers. Black SUV. Tinted windows, that right?" Darius's pulse thudded in his ears, but his face stayed marble. "You have a plate number for that vehicle?" The officers exchanged a glance, quick, guilty, like kids caught with their hands in the cookie jar. They didn't. Of course they didn't. "I'll need to see your license and registration," the older one, Rick Holden, said, voice clipped now, irritation crackling like static. "No problem." Darius nodded toward the dash. "Wallet's right there." He moved slowly, the way you'd approach a spooked horse, keeping both hands in plain sight. He'd seen how fast a twitch could become a tragedy. Rick took the license, frowned at it like it had personally offended him. "You from Little Rock originally? Been stationed in Fort Smith for the last 5 years? What's your business there?" Darius met his eyes for a long, deliberate moment. "Law enforcement." The words landed like a slap. Rick's brows furrowed. Cole circled the Tahoe like a shark scenting blood, peering into windows that reflected his own nervous face back at him. Rick leaned closer, breath fogging the glass. "Law enforcement, huh? You got ID to back that up?" Darius's voice stayed glacier calm. "I do, but I'd like to know the reason for the stop before I hand over any credentials." Rick's patience snapped like a brittle twig. "Don't get smart with me, sir. Step out of the vehicle." The command cracked through the night, louder than it needed to be, echoing off the overpass like gunfire. Darius's training kicked in. Words over escalation, de-escalate, breathe. He unbuckled his seatbelt with the slow grace of a man defusing a bomb, reached deliberately to his belt clip, and held up a leather badge case. The gold shield caught the cruiser's headlights and flashed, a tiny sun in the darkness. U.S. Marshal Coleman, he said clearly, letting the words ring like a bell. You might want to rethink how you're handling this stop. The silence that followed was so thick you could have spread it on toast. Rick blinked. Cole's smirk evaporated like mist in a microwave. The younger cop actually stumbled back a step, flashlight beam jittering across the asphalt. You're a marshal? Rick's voice cracked like a teenager's. That's what I said. Darius's tone could have frozen coffee. You're welcome to radio it in. I districts out of Fort Smith. Task Force Division 9. Rick stared at the badge like it might bite him. Cole swallowed so hard his Adam's apple bobbed like a fishing lure. Dispatch crackled faintly, confirming credentials in a voice that sounded almost bored. Cole's face went the color of skim milk. We, didn't realize, sir, Rick muttered, the word sir tasting like vinegar. Darius's expression didn't flicker. That's the problem, isn't it? For a few seconds, the only sound was the wind hissing through the pines and the distant drip, drip, drip of rain from the overpass. The officers avoided his eyes. Embarrassed, defensive, their earlier swagger deflated like a punctured balloon. Darius didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The silence was heavier than any lecture. Rick finally muttered, "We'll let you go, Marshal. Sorry for the inconvenience." Darius took back his license and badge, fingers steady as a surgeon's. "Next time, start with respect. It'll save everyone a lot of trouble." He turned the key. The Tahoe's engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting twin tunnels through the wet dark. The two officers trudged back to their cruiser, whispering furiously, faces pale as ghosts. Darius drove off, the tension still coiled in his gut like a spring. But the story? Oh, it was far from over. Because this stop wasn't staying quiet, and the world was about to light up like the 4th of July. Darius thought the nightmare would end there. Badge shown, misunderstanding cleared, everyone goes home to their respective corners of the universe. But as he eased back onto the highway, he caught Rick and Cole in the rear view, still huddled by their cruiser, gesturing wildly at his taillights. One of them keyed his radio. The other pointed. Darius's stomach sank like a stone in deep water. Rick marched back, face tight as a drum. "Mind stepping out for a quick word, Marshal?" The title came out forced, like he'd chewed glass to say it. Darius exhaled through his nose, a sound that would have been a laugh if it weren't so damn tired. He stepped out, hands visible, the night air cool against his skin. "You've got my ID, my badge, and dispatch confirmation. What else do you need?" Rick avoided eye contact like it burned. "Just standard follow-up. You understand. Given the nature of your vehicle—" "Given the nature of my vehicle," Darius interrupted, voice low and lethal, "or given the nature of me driving it?" Rick's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Cole shifted behind him, glancing at the ground like it might swallow him whole. "You mind explaining what you mean by that?" Rick finally managed, defensive as a cornered alley cat. "I mean," Darius said, stepping closer, calm but firm. "I've been stopped twice this year for driving my own government-issued SUV. Once in Missouri, once in Oklahoma. Each time it's the same song and dance. What are you doing around here?" Cole cleared his throat, a sound like gravel in a blender. "No offense, sir, but you fit a description. We were just doing our jobs." Darius took another step, close enough to see the sweat beading on Cole's upper lip. "Doing your job means knowing when you're crossing a line. You don't grab at someone's door without cause. You don't assume guilt before a name's been checked." Rick's hand twitched near his belt. "We didn't assume anything?" Darius stared him down, the kind of stare that could peel paint. "Yes, you did. You just didn't expect the badge." That line landed like a sledgehammer. Rick's jaw worked soundlessly. Cole looked like he wanted the earth to open and swallow him. The reality of what almost happened settled between them, heavier than the humid air, because if Darius hadn't been a marshal, if he'd been just another black man in a nice car, this could have ended with cuffs, or worse. Finally, Rick muttered, "You got our names. You'll hear from the department." Darius's tone softened, but only a fraction. "You should hope I do. Because the conversation I'll have won't be about vengeance. It'll be about training." He pulled out his phone, snapped a crystal-clear photo of their cruiser. Plate number, unit markings, both officers frozen in the frame like deer in headlights. Neither stopped him. Rick looked like he wanted to speak, but pride or guilt glued his tongue. Darius stepped back to his Tahoe. "Think about the kind of officer you want to be." He drove off, the low rumble of the engine drowning out the officer's stunned silence. For miles he just drove. No music, no words, hands steady on the wheel but his mind racing like a freight train. It wasn't the stop itself that shook him. It was the pattern. His father's voice echoed in his head, gravelly and wise. "A uniform doesn't make you safe, son. It makes you visible. And sometimes that's the danger." His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Lionel Briggs, his colleague from Fort Smith. "Hey man, you good? Just saw a dispatch note about a Bentonville traffic stop under your ID." "Yeah," Darius said, voice rough. "I'm fine. 2 local cops thought they hit the jackpot tonight." Lionel let out a low whistle that crackled through the speaker. "You serious? Again?" "Yeah." Darius's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. "This one's gonna stick, though. I've got footage. So do they." Lionel's voice dropped, concerned. "You thinking about reporting it?" "I'm past thinking," Darius said. "It's already in motion." He hung up before Lionel could respond. Outside, Bentonville's lights blurred into watercolor streaks, amber, white, the occasional neon sign flickering like a heartbeat. Darius knew this wasn't the last he'd hear of that stop. Incidents like this had a way of echoing, rippling outward like a stone dropped in still water. But what he didn't know yet was that by morning, everyone would be talking about it. The next morning, the Bentonville Police Department was a hive of whispered panic. Word had spread faster than gossip at a church picnic. 2 officers had unknowingly pulled over a U.S. Marshal and nearly detained him. Officers avoided eye contact in the hallways. Coffee tasted like ash. Meanwhile, in Fort Smith, Darius sat at his kitchen table, black coffee steaming beside him, replaying the footage on his phone. Every second was there. The stop, the tone, the posture, Rick's hand on the door handle like he was about to rip it off its hinges. Nothing exaggerated, nothing edited, just truth, raw and unfiltered. He paused on the frame where his badge caught the light. A tiny, defiant spark in the dark. That reflection had saved the night from turning into a headline with a body count. Tanya stood by the counter, arms crossed, worry etched into the lines around her eyes. "You sure you want to take this further?" Her voice was calm, but it trembled at the edges. "I've seen what happens when people try to hold them accountable. They make it messy. They twist it." Darius didn't look up. "If I don't, it keeps happening. To me, to someone else. Maybe next time, the badge doesn't come out fast enough." Tanya sighed, walking closer, her hand warm on his shoulder. "I know, but you just painted a target on your back." He met her eyes, a small, weary smile tugging at his lips. Wouldn't be the first time. Later that day, Darius drove to the Bentonville PD to submit his official report. The front desk officer looked like he'd seen a ghost when Darius walked in. Nervous fidgeting, eyes darting to the exit like he might bolt. Rick and Cole were in a side room, their eyes flicking up briefly when Darius passed, then snapping away like he was the sun. Rick's face was drained, the color of old dishwater. Cole's jaw was so tight it could have cracked walnuts. Inside Captain Neil Peterson's office, the air was thick enough to chew. Peterson gestured to a chair, sweat beading at his temples. "Marshal Coleman, thank you for coming in. Just Darius is fine." He set his phone on the desk like a loaded gun. Peterson cleared his throat, the sound wet and uncomfortable. "I reviewed the footage. It's not good. The optics alone, it's not about optics," Darius cut in, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "It's about behavior. They treated me like a threat before they even knew my name." Peterson rubbed the bridge of his nose, aging 10 years in 10 seconds. "I won't defend that. They'll face review. I just hope this doesn't blow up beyond Bentonville." Darius looked at him steadily, unblinking. "That's not up to you anymore." Peterson frowned, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. "What do you mean?" "The body cam footage is public record once the investigation starts," Darius said. "And if your department tries to bury it, I've got my own recording." The captain's shoulders sagged like a deflated parade float. He knew what that meant. Once the footage hit the internet, the narrative wouldn't belong to the police. It would belong to the people watching, looping, sharing, outraged. Darius stood. "I didn't come here for vengeance, Captain. I came for accountability." Peterson nodded slowly, the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Understood." When Darius left, Rick and Cole were by their patrol car in the lot, the air between them crackling with tension. Rick stepped forward, voice cracking. "Marshal, I just wanted to say we—" Darius raised a hand, cutting him off like a blade. "Save it. If you're sorry, prove it. Next time you stop someone who looks like me, treat them like a citizen, not a suspect." Rick lowered his head. Cole didn't say a word. Darius got into his Tahoe and drove off, watching them shrink in the rear view, smaller somehow, than the men who'd swaggered up to his window the night before. That evening in his home office, Darius's phone lit up with a message from Lionel. "Check X. Somebody leaked it." He opened his laptop. The video was already trending, body cam footage from 2 Bentonville officers stopping a federal marshal. Over 100,000 views in under 2 hours. The comment section was a war zone. Disbelief, fury, memes of Rick S., hand frozen on the door handle captioned, "When you grab the wrong car door." Some called Darius a hero for his glacier-calm composure. Others defended the officers, claiming they were just doing their jobs. But the clip spoke for itself. Darius measured and steady, the officers unraveling like cheap yarn. He leaned back, the weight of it all crashing over him like a wave. He hadn't wanted fame or outrage or headlines, just truth. Now the truth was out there, raw and unfiltered, and it wasn't going away. But what he didn't realize was that this video would grow beyond him. And soon, even the department wouldn't be able to contain it. By the following afternoon, the story had exploded past Bentonville's borders like a grenade with a pulled pin. Local Arkansas stations led with it. Then Texas, Missouri, Tennessee. By evening, national headlines screamed, "Black US Marshal wrongfully pulled over by Bentonville police." It wasn't just a local embarrassment anymore. It was a public storm. In his Fort Smith office, Darius watched anchors dissect the incident. The same shaky body cam footage looping endlessly. One clip zoomed in on Rick's hand on the door handle, the pause before Darius raised his badge stretching into eternity. Across social media, the video was a virus, some calling Darius a hero, others claiming he was overreacting. At his desk, Lionel swiveled his chair, grinning despite the gravity. "Man, I told you this would explode. You're trending #2 nationwide on X." Darius looked bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that lived in your marrow. "That's not the kind of trend anyone wants." Lionel leaned forward, serious now. "You handling it better than I would have. You kept calm while they were seconds from drawing on you." "Calm's the only thing that keeps people alive in moments like that," Darius said quietly. "But calm doesn't fix the system that created it." Meanwhile, at the Bentonville PD, the mood was funeral dirge grim. Officers avoided Rick and Cole like they carried the plague. Conversations died mid-sentence when they walked by. Captain Peterson's door stayed shut tight. Behind it, he sat with the two officers and an internal affairs investigator, the air thick with dread. Rick's voice trembled. "Captain, we didn't know who he was. We thought—" Peterson cut him off like a guillotine. "That's the problem, Rick. You thought wrong. You escalated before verifying, and now the department's reputation is taking the hit." Cole clenched his fists, knuckles white. "We followed protocol." "Protocol doesn't include shouting at a driver who hasn't resisted," Peterson snapped. "And it sure doesn't include touching someone's door handle before probable cause." Rick looked down, defeated. "What happens to us now?" Peterson sighed, the sound of a man watching his career circle the drain. "You're both on administrative leave until further notice. The review board meets next week." Outside, a reporter stood on the steps, live on camera. The Bentonville Police Department has confirmed that 2 officers involved in the controversial stop have been placed on leave pending investigation. Public outrage continues to grow as federal officials weigh in. Back in Fort Smith, Tanya scrolled through her phone, pride and worry warring on her face. "They're talking about you on every channel, Darius. Even CNN." "I didn't want it to be about me," he said, setting his phone down like it burned. "I wanted it to be about what happens when power goes unchecked." Tanya sat beside him, her hand finding his. "You're giving people something to talk about, something real. But it's gonna get ugly before it gets better." He knew she was right. The comments were turning vicious, threads devolving into shouting matches, politicians grandstanding, law enforcement unions crying breach of internal security. Then came the call from Deputy Director Marlene Gibbs, his superior in the U.S. Marshal Service. Her tone was calm but carried the weight of a gavel. "Darius, I just watched the footage. You handled yourself professionally." "Appreciate that, ma'am. However," she continued, "the Department of Justice is asking for a written report from you directly. They're classifying this as a civil rights review." Darius leaned back, the room tilting slightly. "So it's going federal. It's already there. Keep your statements factual, clean, measured. The media's circling like blood in the water." "Understood." She paused before hanging. "You did the right thing, Darius. Just remember, truth has a cost." The next morning, protests erupted outside the Bentonville PD. Dozens of residents waved signs. "Badge not immunity. Accountability for all." Cars honked in solidarity. Reporters swarmed like locusts. Inside, Rick watched from a window, face pale as death. "This is out of control," he muttered. Cole didn't respond. He'd deleted every social media account the night before, his phone a relentless buzz of reporters, union reps, family asking what happened. Captain Peterson emerged, voice low. "Gentlemen, this is bigger than us now. Lawyers are involved. Civil rights groups want statements." Rick rubbed his temples, a migraine blooming. "All because we pulled over the wrong guy." "No," Peterson said flatly. "Because you pulled over the wrong guy for the wrong reason." By day's end, the mayor released a statement. Rehearsed, political, promising thorough investigation and transparent accountability. It did nothing to calm the storm. Back home, Darius's phone buzzed with a video link from Lionel. Yuffie got to see this. It was a viral compilation. Darius's calm voice against the officers' raised ones, ending with the caption, "Professionalism isn't about who wears the badge. It's about who respects it." Over 1 million views. Darius stared at the screen, whispering, "This is bigger than me now." Tanya walked up behind him. "Then handle it like you always do, with grace and facts." He nodded, but deep down, he knew the next move wouldn't be his. The system was reacting. And when systems feel threatened, they don't apologize. They fight back. 2 days after the leak, the narrative began to twist like a snake in a trap. Headlines shifted. Was the marshal's response an overreaction? Commentators who'd praised Darius now questioned his motives. Words like misconduct and possible provocation slithered into print. That morning, Darius read a Bentonville PD statement. The stop stemmed from a legitimate misunderstanding during an active investigation. We remain committed to transparency and professionalism. Legitimate misunderstanding. The phrase burned like acid. His phone buzzed. Lionel. They're spinning it already, saying you escalated by refusing to step out. I expected it, Darius said flatly. The system protects its own first. But you've got the footage. Everyone saw it. They're not arguing with the footage, Darius said. They're arguing with perception. They know how to make doubt look like reason. That afternoon, local reporter Caitlin Reeves called for an on-camera interview. I'll do it, Darius said, but I'm not here for a pity segment. I want the truth front and center. The interview was at a quiet cafe near the courthouse. Cameras rolled. Caitlin asked, "What do you say to those who claim this was a misunderstanding?" Darius leaned forward, eyes steady. If misunderstanding means grabbing someone's car door before verifying who they are, then we've lowered the bar for accountability. This isn't about me. It's about how quickly people with authority lose control when faced with someone they think is beneath them. Caitlin nodded. Some say you're using your federal position to humiliate local law enforcement. Darius's smile was faint but sharp. I'm using my position to remind people that authority means nothing without discipline. If they'd treated a teacher, a mechanic, or a grocery clerk like that, would anyone have cared? Probably not. That's the real problem. The segment aired that evening and struck like lightning. Supporters applauded his composure. Critics accused him of being political. By morning, an opinion piece claimed, Marshal Coleman may be right about bias, but releasing that footage publicly has compromised an ongoing investigation. Darius hadn't released anything. The leak hadn't come from him. But now the accusation hung over him like smoke. He called Lionel. They're trying to make me the problem. Yeah, Lionel said grimly. Classic playbook. Shift the focus from the act to the reaction. They won't win that way, Darius said. But that afternoon, a letter arrived from the US Marshal's office, requesting a review of his involvement. Not a suspension. Yet. Just a formal inquiry. Tanya read his expression. They're coming after you, aren't they? They're protecting their own image, he said. Even when I'm one of them, she sat beside him. So what now? Now, he said slowly. I make it official. I file my own complaint. No press, no shouting, just the truth in writing. That night, he drafted a federal misconduct report, attaching both recordings, time-stamping every detail, factual, precise, unembellished. At midnight, he added one final sentence. This is not about race alone. It's about what happens when assumption becomes standard procedure. He hit send. The next morning, Captain Peterson called, voice uneasy. Holden and Turner have hired attorneys. They're claiming emotional distress and reputational damage due to public exposure. Darius chuckled, the sound hollow. They're victims now? I don't agree with it, Peterson admitted, but their union's backing them. There's talk of a lawsuit if disciplinary action goes too far. Darius closed his eyes. Of course there is. You should know. Some of the guys there respect what I did. They just can't say it out loud. I'm not looking for applause, Captain. I'm looking for change. After the call, Tanya placed a plate in front of him. They'll twist everything until you're the villain. That's fine, he said. The truth doesn't need to shout to outlast a lie. Over the next days, the story shifted like sand. Talk shows debated whether Darius was integrity incarnate or an agitator in uniform. Anonymous posts claimed he'd provoked the officers. But his inbox filled with messages, citizens, veterans, teachers, young black officers thanking him for standing his ground. one from a retired Kansas police chief. I watched your video 3 times. I've seen this culture from the inside for 40 years. You didn't overreact. You exposed a flaw that's been there the whole time. Stay steady, Marshal. That night, rain tapping the window, Darius thought of his father, the lessons, the quiet strength, the warnings. The cost of truth was heavy, but silence cost more. The Bentonville courthouse was packed the morning of the disciplinary hearing. Reporters lined the steps, microphones poised like spears. Inside, the air crackled with tension, truth and reputation about to collide. Darius arrived early, formal US Marshal uniform crisp, posture steady. Tanya sat in the back, her presence an anchor. Lionel stood near the entrance, scanning the crowd, giving Darius a nod that said, "I've got your 6." At the front, 3 board members, Judge Warren Dale, Dr. Lenora Fields, Deputy Chief Paul Hines. Judge Dale spoke first. "Marshal Coleman, thank you for attending voluntarily. This hearing is recorded. You'll have an opportunity to provide your statement after evidence review." Darius nodded. "Understood, Your Honor." Across the room, Rick and Cole sat with their attorneys. Rick's hands fidgeted. Cole stared ahead, jaw clenched. They looked like men awaiting a verdict that could end their careers. The hearing began with the body cam footage. Every sound filled the room, the siren, the sharp tones, Darius's calm replies. When Rick reached for the door handle, a collective gasp rippled through the audience. Judge Dale leaned forward. "Officer Holden, is that you attempting to open the vehicle?" Rick cleared his throat. "Yes, sir, but I believe the driver might be armed. It was a precaution." Dr. Fields interjected gently. "Yet you hadn't verified his identity, nor was there visible evidence of a weapon. What specific threat prompted that action?" Rick hesitated. "Ma'am," he seemed composed, "because that's what the footage shows," she finished. Cole's lawyer jumped in. "My client followed procedure based on available information. The vehicle matched the suspect description." Judge Dale interrupted. "Was that description based on a license plate or physical appearance?" The lawyer faltered. "A partial visual description, sir, of an African-American male in a dark SUV." The silence was brutal. Even Cole's shoulders slumped. When Darius spoke, his voice carried without anger. "I didn't file this report to ruin careers. I filed it because every officer has a duty to act with restraint and respect. What happened that night could have gone a very different direction. For me, for them, for everyone watching this footage now. And that's not a risk anyone should accept as normal." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I've worked with law enforcement across this country. I know what it means to make hard calls under pressure. But this wasn't pressure. It was prejudice disguised as protocol." Dr. Fields nodded. "Are you suggesting this represents a broader issue?" "I'm not suggesting," Darius said softly. "I'm confirming." Murmurs rose. The judge tapped his gavel. Cole's attorney tried to deflect. "Would you agree your federal position influenced your perception of threat?" Darius looked at him steadily. "If by perception you mean expecting to be treated like a citizen instead of a suspect, then yes, my expectations were influenced." Quiet chuckles rippled, quickly stifled. Rick lowered his head, remorse finally cracking through. After hours, the board recessed. Outside, reporters shouted. Tanya joined Darius on the steps. "You spoke from the heart." "That's all I could do." An hour later, the board returned. Judge Dale cleared his throat. After reviewing footage, testimony, and records, this board concludes that Officers Holden and Turner violated procedural and ethical standards. Their actions demonstrated unprofessional conduct inconsistent with community trust. Rick closed his eyes. Cole exhaled sharply. Effective immediately, both officers are suspended without pay pending further review. The Bentonville Police Department will undergo additional bias and procedural training under federal oversight. Whispers filled the room. Dr. Fields added, Marshal Coleman, your restraint and professionalism are noted. This outcome is disciplinary and educational. We hope it leads to institutional change." Darius nodded once. As the room emptied, Rick approached hesitantly. "Marshal, I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry. I got it wrong." Darius studied him. "Owning it is the first right step. Make sure the next one's different." Rick nodded and walked away. Cole followed, eyes down. Outside, Lionel clapped Darius's shoulder. "That was one hell of a hearing." "It wasn't about winning," Darius said. "It was about showing the truth can still speak, even when people try to bury it." Reporters shouted for statements. He didn't stop. He walked to Tanya, took her hand, and exhaled for the first time in weeks. The sun set over Fort Smith as Darius drove home, golden light slicing through the blinds. Tanya had left coffee on the warmer, his quiet reward after weeks of noise. He poured a cup, sat by the window. Silence felt earned. On the table, a stack of letters. He opened one at random. "Marshal Coleman, I watched your video with my teenage son. I'm a retired officer. I wanted him to see how a man can hold authority without losing compassion. You reminded me what integrity looks like." He folded it carefully. Compassion. That's what was missing. Tanya emerged. "News says Bentonville PD dropped both officers. Permanent termination. New training programs start next month." That's a start. "You think it'll change anything?" "Maybe not overnight, but someone will remember it. Some rookie next week will think twice before grabbing a door handle." She reached for his hand. "You did what you had to do." He smiled faintly. "And I'd do it again." Later that week, Darius spoke at a law enforcement seminar in Oklahoma City. Before new recruits, he began simply, "Respect starts before the badge, not after it." He told the story, not as a lecture, but as a warning. "When I was younger, my father told me the badge doesn't protect you. It magnifies who you are. If you carry fear or bias, the badge won't fix it. It'll amplify it." The room was silent. A young recruit approached afterward, nervous but sincere. "Marshal Coleman, I needed to hear that. My dad's a cop. He says people remember how you make them feel more than what you do." Darius smiled. "Your dad's a wise man. Hold on to that." A week later, at a diner with Lionel, a woman hesitated by their table. "You're Marshal Coleman, right?" He nodded. "Thank you. My brother's a state trooper. He showed your hearing to his department. Said it changed how they talk about traffic stops." "Tell your brother it means more than he knows." Lionel leaned back. "Change doesn't always start with noise. Sometimes it's just one person at a time." Darius looked out at the glowing streetlights. "That's the only way it ever really works." He thought of Bentonville, the rain, the flashing lights, the tension. He thought of Rick and Cole. Maybe they'd learned something too. At home, he hung his jacket, sat by the window. His badge gleamed under the lamp. Not a symbol of authority tonight, but a reminder. He whispered, "Do right when no one's watching. That's the only kind of justice that lasts." Then he looked into the camera on his desk, the one he'd used weeks ago, and pressed record. This message is for anyone who wears a badge, carries a title, or holds power over another human being. The real measure of that power isn't how it makes people obey you. It's how it makes them trust you. He paused, eyes steady. Because justice isn't just a courtroom word, it's a choice, every day. He hit stop. The screen faded to black, and for the first time, Darius felt the weight lift completely. The story had begun with flashing lights and fear, but it ended with light of another kind. If you believe in truth, accountability, and respect, subscribe for more stories that remind us why integrity still matters.